Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 35th episode of the Manor Podcast. I'm your co-host, Roger Bodee, joined as always with my best friend and other co-host, Michael Hamilton. Michael, did you ever think making a podcast would be so hard?
No, I knew editing was a reasonable amount of work before we started, but today was a lot. This week was a lot, I guess.
Yeah, so this is, I guess, if we want to be technical, the third attempt of us trying to record a podcast for the week. We tried doing it twice in the same room, and every time we tried recording it in the same room, the audio sounded like garbage, I guess. So if there's any audio engineers that have any advice about how to set up recording studios with two people talking at the same time in the same room, hit us up. We need the help. But until then, we're just going to go with the same old mopey setup that we have right now. And I'm sure Michael's roommates will walk across the screen 18 times and we'll have a grand old time.
18, that'll probably be like once or twice.
Sure. But do you want to spend today's episode talking about podcast logistics and how upset I am, or do you want to talk about deck lists?
No, let's talk about some deck lists because there's some spice over ProQuest, the first weekend of ProQuest.
Okay, what spice level do you want to start at?
Well, let's start mild. Let's start with Phi, the kind of the boogeyman of the format.
Okay, go for it.
So we're starting with Stephen Carhair. I don't know. Names are hard. He won a ProQuest with Phi. And for his equipment, he has Blossom of Spring, Flamescale Furnace, Final Spring Tunic, Mask Momentum, Mask of the Pouncing Lynx, Searing Ember Blade, Snapdragon Scalers, Tide Flippers, and Tiger Stripe Shuko.
Just go for it. It's fine. Everybody loves
We'll leave it in. It's fine. So
just go.
So equipment's already like a little bit interesting. It's got Tunic, Blossom of Spring, and Flamescale Furnace. You would think. I guess this kind of stands out to me because I would expect Blossom of Spring and Flamescale Furnace to both be for like the kind of fast matchups, and Tunic would be for the longer matchups where you can get value out of multiple Tunic counters. But including both Flamescale Furnace and Blossom of Spring, what matchups would you play one over the other?
When you want to go fast, but you don't want to block, and matchups where you want to block, but you might not go fast. So like against Ice Lexi, you'd probably play like Flamescale Furnace. But against a deck like Icelander, you probably would play like Bindel Spring Tunic, and then a deck like Rhinar, you would just go vroom fast, not have to care about Onnits, and play Blossom of Spring.
Okay, that makes sense. Like decks that you're not going to block ever anyway, you just play Blossom of Spring into.
Yeah. If you're not going to block and you want to go fast, Blossom. If you're not going to block and it's going to go long, Findel Spring Tunic. And if you're going to block, Flamescale Furnace.
Sure, makes sense. All right, moving on to the actual contents of the deck, or the cards in the deck. At red, there's 3 Belittle, 3 Blaze Headlong, 3 Brand Cinderclaw, 2 Command and Conquer, 3 Enlightened Strike, 2 Erase Face, 2 Fate Foreseen, 3 Flame Call Awakening, 3 Lava Burst, 3 Mounting Anger, 3 Phoenix Flame, 3 Rise from the Ashes, 3 Rising Resentment, 3 Ronin Renegade, 3 Sink Below, 3 Snatch, and 3 Soaring Strike. At yellow, there's 3 Art of War, 2 Belittle, and 2 Salt the Wound. And at blue, there's 3 Brand with Cinderclaw, 3 Lava Vein Loyalty, 2 Minnowism, 2 Pursuit of Knowledge, 3 Rising Resentment, and 3 Soulbead Strike.
So what do you think about Pursuit of Knowledge?
It's definitely spicy. And it looks like Pursuit of Knowledge was included instead of Blue Snatch.
Yeah, that's a bit odd to me.
Yeah, that stands out to me because they do a lot of the same thing where they're a blue that threatens a pretty nice on hit. So it's pretty.
Yeah, one costs 0 resources and the other costs 2 resources, and 2 is a lot higher than 0.
Yeah, so the main reason that you would want Pursuit is it's better in hands where you have too many blues, by like a lot. So if you have 3 blues and a red, maybe you would play Pursuit. But it seems even in 2 blue hands, a lot of the time you would play your second blue if it was like a blue snatch. But with 2 blues, if one of them's Pursuit of Knowledge, I don't think you can really play the Pursuit of Knowledge.
Yeah, I don't know. And then what's also interesting is that some file lists have 3 sync bullets, but it's not a deck card that they're not going to play very often. But this list is opting for not only 3 sync bullets, but 2 Fate Foreseeans. So that's just a lot of defensive cards for a deck that wants to go broom broom, right?
Yeah, I think this is kind of a concession to Oldheim. Fi is a deck that's like shown a lot of resilience to being fatigued. So the way most Oldheim decks attack Fi is by attacking with these disruptive on hits, and it's really nice to have your 0 for 4 defense reactions against Oldheim attacking you, especially when your deck doesn't block very well by itself.
Yeah, that's fair. And then we also have 2 copies of Erase Face, so and 2 copies of Command and Conquer, so splitting the difference between those two. I imagine Erase Face is mostly for Dash, but because that can be a pretty tricky matchup for 5. Dash is usually just actually like a step faster unless you're on like your Nut, Double Art of War, Spreading Flames turn or something like that. So Erase Face could definitely help in that matchup.
Yeah, that makes sense. It is solid into Dash and kind of just forces her to block with 2 cards. So
Anything else you want to say about this stock Fi list? I guess not stock, but anything else you want to say about this Fi list?
yeah, I think most of the other stuff is stuff that we're pretty accustomed to seeing in Phyllis a lot of the time. The 3 Rise from the Ashes isn't in every Phyllis, but I think it's a pretty common inclusion now. It's just frequently a 0 for 4, and that's good enough. You have to have 2 Phoenix Flames in the graveyard to really get your 4 points of value out of it, but when you do, then it's very solid.
Yeah. And so I guess despite our prediction that Fi would just be like all over the place in the metagame, there really weren't a lot of Fi showing up in top 8s or the overall results of the weekend. What do you think that's attributed to?
Yeah, I think there were a lot of Fis that or a lot of players that registered Fi as their deck of choice, but it didn't have the best conversion rate. I think part of that is Fi doesn't have a great matchup into Oldheim or Icelander, and those are the 2 most popular decks. So not being good into the 2 most popular decks is not a great spot to be.
Yeah. It's interesting that the Ice Heroes actually wound up being as prevalent as they are. And I guess with that being said, which Ice Hero do you want to transition to next?
Let's talk about Icelander. I love Icelander.
I never knew that.
So Noah Bagelman, hope that's right, took Icelander to 3rd place at the Battle Hardened in New Jersey. For equipment, he has Alluvian Constellus, Coronet Peak, Final Spring Tunic, Ironhide Gauntlet, Metacarpus Node, Storm Shredders, and Waning Moon. Already, there's a few differences from my list that stand out. There's no Crown of Providence, there's no Nullrune Hood, there's no Iron Rot Gauntlet. So definitely trimming on the equipment to make space in the main deck or the card part of the deck.
Yeah, the card cards that go in the card part of the deck instead of the equipment cards that go in the equipment card part of the deck.
Yeah, cutting these equipment that are like marginal upside in specific matchups, we'll see what he chose to play instead of them.
I think the only one that like you play that I think was like absolutely necessary or gave you the most coverage was Nullrune Hood, just because AB5 in the mirror is just such a critical thing to cover up their Red Aether Ice Veins. And once you're unable to cover up their Red Aether Ice Veins cleanly, it just kind of puts you at a pretty severe disadvantage as far as like being able to keep functional hands or do anything on your turn after they come at you with a Red Aether Ice Vein, especially if they have a piece of disruption like Chilling Ice Vein or Amnet of Ice. And you're just lowering their requirements to have those disruptive cards and set them up once you're on AB4. So I don't think Coronet Peak, I don't think Crown of Providence is hugely necessary in Oldheim. It's just nice. And I really don't think Iron Rot Gauntlet, like that's just like the most marginal 1% I think you can get into 5, because Ironhide Gauntlet's still fine in that matchup. It's not, a huge spew by any stretch of the imagination, but just the Nullrune would just kind of be the one piece of equipment that I would really like to see added back in.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I I think Iron Rock Gauntlet's probably like definitely the worst of the three things that were cut. I do think Crown of Providence gives you a lot of equity against Oldheim. Being comfortable just like arsenaling your sink below and not getting blown out by Command and Conquers is really nice. Though some Oldheims are even cutting Command and Conquer or trimming it or cutting it in the matchup. So if they're not all playing 3 Command and Conquers against you, then it kind of feels a lot worse to be playing Crown of Providence.
Yeah.
But it's just
specifically, it was Command and Conquer pummel turns that it was the hardest for Icelander to deal with.
So moving on to the cards in the card deck. We have at red 3 Aether Ice Vein, 2 Command and Conquer, 2 Encase, 3 Enlightened Strike, 3 Finals Fighting Spirit, 3 Sink Below, and 3 Wounded Bull. At yellow, there's 3 Aether Ice Vein. And at blue, there's 3 Aether Hail, 3 Amulet of Ice, 3 Blizzard, 3 Brain Freeze, 3 Brothers in Arms, 3 Channel Lake Frigid, 1 Channel the Bleak Expanse, 3 Cold Snap, 3 Emeritus Scolding, 2 Energy Potion, 3 Frost Hex, 3 Frosting, 1 Heart of Fyendal, 3 Hypothermia, 3 Ice Bolt, 3 Ice Eternal, 3 Insidious Chill, 3 Polar Blast, 2 Winter Spite.
Real quick, is that Misty making that noise in the background still, like those clicks and clocks?
I think it's Koopa. Let me...
yeah, I just keep hearing them clicky clackety.
Okay, let me see what I can do.
Okay.
See if I can calm him down. I shook his food bowl around, and he stopped. For okay. Now, Sounds I don't good. Know. I don't know if he'll stay stopped.
I guess we'll just have to clickety clack see.
Misty says hi. And there he goes again. Oh my god. I'm sorry.
Who knew making a podcast would just be this easy, you know?
Uh-huh.
Don't take off your...
Yeah. You can't. It'll ruin the video magic, but I'm warm.
Okay. Just take it off now. It's fine.
Okay. Okay.
So what do you think the 2 Encase are there for? Do you think there's a good plan for them, or do you think they're there just in case?
I actually don't know what Encase is for. It does help trigger like Amulet of Ice and Insidious Chill, but the card by itself isn't really doing anything powerful on rate, I guess. It's just 0 for 3 that costs your action point also.
I guess against Phi, it's a 0 for 4, because if they can't activate Phi's hero ability, that's a point of damage you're saving against Phi. It's a 0 cost card. And Icebind is situational for them having to have an arsenal in order to get value out of it. So maybe it's just a hedge against Phi in particular.
Yeah, that makes sense. It is solid into Phi with stopping the hero activation. And Phi never... Well, I shouldn't say never, but we basically never see AB3 from Phi, so it does shut him down.
Yeah, and then there's always the other additional upside of Phi not being able to activate Fyendal Spring Tunic or Tide Flippers. Importantly, though, if they're running, I guess, either Headpiece, Mask of the Bouncing Links, or Mask of Momentum, it's not going to stop that because it's a trigger. Same with Tiger Stripe Shuko, since they're just triggered abilities, not activated abilities, Encase doesn't stop those from doing their thing.
Yeah. So there are some other kind of notable inclusions here. We also see 2 Command and Conquers, which is a card that we've both played with. And I know you recently said you weren't very happy with it in your Icelander deck, and I was not very happy with it. Like the first time I played it, and they just blocked with 2 cards. I'm like, I was ready to find something else.
A lot of people are trying to bring Command and Conquerors back into Icelander, just as like a hedge into Icelaxy in particular. I think the issue overall with having it is that it's hard to find good use cases for it where you're, like you said, not just letting your opponent block with 2 cards and move on with their life. I guess with that being said, normally if they're blocking with 2 cards and then you're also disrupting them on their turn, like I guess it's making your disruption less impactful, because if you make them block with 2 cards and then they just come back, pitch a card, attack you, you giving them a frostbite without any frost hexes or any disruption you have lined up isn't necessarily doing what you're intending to be doing with the deck. And it's not pushing damage through cleanly, because obviously the 6 breakpoints usually pretty easy for decks to block. And I think a lot of the time, Fi's opponents in particular have arsenals less often than other decks. And the reason that
Icelander's opponents.
What did I keep saying Fi? And I think Icelander's opponents have arsenals less often than the average deck in general, just because if you're forcing your opponent to pitch extra cards, normally if they're pitching that card, that could have been the card they would have set up to arsenal. And if they're using those for resources instead of an arsenal, then obviously your Command and Conquer is not even threatening anything if they don't have an arsenal to begin with. So I guess that's always been my issue with the card. But I didn't know if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of the time they want to keep their arsenal empty, because if you disrupt them in a way that stops them from playing a card, they want to have their arsenal available to put the card in arsenal. So like if you have an empty arsenal and I play, or if the Fi has an empty arsenal and the Icelander plays a Channel Lake Frigid, then a lot of the time the Fi will just end up arsenaling one of the cards because he won't be able to use it effectively. And same for like getting blizzarded sometimes or situations like that. It's really nice to be able to just throw something in arsenal that you can't use because of her disruption. So like you want to keep your arsenal empty for that reason.
Yeah, but I guess on the turn cycle after that, then if you like play Channel Lake Frigid, the arsenal, and then you Command and Conquer, I guess that's kind of like the play pattern you want to like ideally have, but it's just not always going to line up that way.
Yeah. And then the last thing that I think is, I guess the last 2 things is in the blues. I guess there's a few interesting blue things happening. So first, we don't see any copies of blue Aether Ice Vein. What do you think about that?
I don't hate it, especially if you're on the extra Ice Fuse cards of Encase. Blue Aether Ice Vein can be pretty clunky a lot of the time, and decks are usually on AV3, like the decks that I guess decks are usually polarized in between like AB 1, 3, or 5. And 5 is usually only the Icelander mirror, just because so many of her pieces of equipment have natural AB2. So against the decks that have AB3, it's not great. Against the decks that have AB1, they're usually the more aggressive decks. And playing Aether Ice Vein on their turn isn't, it requires a full pitch of a card, and that can be kind of clunky sometimes. So I don't hate cutting it. I still think I would prefer to have it over yellow Aether Ice Veins, but I guess it would warrant further testing.
Yeah, I think that kind of matches my opinion too. I don't think it's like an amazing card that you have to keep in the deck, but I do think I like it more than yellow Aether Ice Vein. Unless your opponents are very, very, very often presenting AB3 against you, then I would probably prefer the yellow. But if most of the time they're presenting AB1 or more than AB3, then I think blue is for the most part better than yellow.
Yeah. And then I guess like the spiciest piece of tech though is just the one channel, the Bleak Expanse. And I guess that's just meant to be like your 4th channel, like Frigid in the end game in the Icelander mirror. I think that might be the only spot where you bring it in, right? Where your opponent can't fuse and trigger their stuff on your turn while this is in play. And it's going to last your full turn cycle, even if you don't pitch an ice card. So it just kind of gives you that little safety blanket for however long it's in play against dying to like the Ice Eternal combo, right?
Yeah, it does protect you from Ice Eternal combo. It is kind of weird though, because you're also turning off your own combo. So if you're playing it, then they can't combo you, but you also can't combo them. So maybe I guess it goes away at the end of your turn, so then you can play your Ice Eternal on their turn. But it seems kind of weird there. I think it's also like okay at spots against Fi, because it stops both Belittle and Art of War from doing their thing, which is nice. I always found that it was like too conditional, I guess. You'd stick it in arsenal and then they just like play normal hands for 2 turns. Then you wouldn't have an arsenal for those 2 turns, basically.
Yeah, or you would draw it and they're casting Art of War, and then you just have this 2 block in your hand. You're like, oh.
And then you don't want to arsenal after that because they do their belittle Art of War turn altogether. And if you don't have it then
yeah.
Then the rest of the time it's bad. And that's similar to my issue with hypothermia against Fi, where just like so often it is sitting at arsenal waiting for a point where it can actually get value, and it can take quite a while for that to happen. So I generally don't like those kind of conditional cards against Fi.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay.
Any final thoughts?
Oh, yeah.
How do we think Icelander is going to be positioned, I guess, going forward?
I think Icelander is still in a pretty good spot. I think her Oldheim matchup isn't amazing. I don't think it's horrible, but I would say that it's not amazing either. So I think she's in a good spot as long as the aggro decks stay popular. She's got a good Fi matchup, has a very good Briar matchup. But yeah.
That makes sense.
And I think you shouldn't cut Scar for a Scar. That card's very good.
It's meh. It's okay. Where are we going to next? Are we talking about the other Iceman now?
Yeah. Let's go to Fred Bird's Oldheim deck. So this was another spicy version of Oldheim. Fred took down Battle Hardened leads with it. So for equipment, there's Arcane Lantern, Crater Fist, Crown of Seeds, Final Spring Tunic, Mage Master Boots, Nullrune Boots, Nullrune Gloves, Rampart of the Ram's Head, Sledge of Anvilheim, Stalagmite, Bastion of Eisenloft, and Winter's Wail. So pretty typical equipment suite. There's a Mage Master Boots and Arcane Lantern, but I think those are the only things that like stand out a little bit. There is both Rampart and Stalagmite.
Okay, Michael, let's get into the cards of the deck now. So what kind of cards can we expect here?
So for the cards, at red, there's 3 Command and Conquer, 3 Enlightened Strike, 3 Glacial Footsteps, 1 Imperial Warhorn, 3 Oakenold, 3 Pummel, 3 Sigil of Solace, 3 Sink Below, 3 Spinal Crush, 3 Staunch Response, 2 Thunderquake. At yellow, there's 1 Tome of Fyendal, and at blue, there's 3 Autumn's Touch, 2 Blizzard, 3 Channel Lake Frigid, 3 Chokeslam, 2 Cold Snap, 3 Disable, 3 Glacial Footsteps, 1 Heart of Fyendal, 1 Hypothermia, 3 Imposing Visage, 1 Sotomorrow, 1 Stamp Authority, 3 Terrace Under, 3 Tome of Harvests, 3 Winter's Bite, and 3 Winter's Grasp.
So I guess first we're probably going to want to talk about this Imperial Warhorn, but in case people aren't aware of what this very prevalent and very good card does, I'm just going to read it off real quick. It is a new card from Dynasty. It costs 2. It only comes in red as a Majestic. It's legendary, so you can only have 1 Imperial Warhorn in your deck. And it reads, action, pay a resource, destroy Imperial Warhorn, choose any number of heroes. Each of them chooses an ally, aura, item, or landmark permanent they control. Destroy each permanent chosen this way. If you are royal, instead you choose the permanents. So I would imagine what the plan is with this card is first you play it on your turn, and you don't do anything else for your turn because it takes your action point. Then your opponent will give you a Frost Hex, because Frost Hex is an aura that is given to you by Icelander, and you sacrifice it. I don't imagine you would play this anywhere else, because let's say you're playing against Dromai. What you're going to do then against Dromai is you're going to play this, give up your action point, activate it, and make them sacrifice a dragon, and you're going to get 1 Aether Ashling for 2 action points in a card. And that sounds atrocious. Maybe if Prism came back into Classic Constructed and Oldheims didn't want to lose to Library of Solana, you could make them sacrifice a landmark, or you could choose. But yeah, I don't really see any other use for this card.
So there is one other use case for it. It's in the Dash matchup, where Dash is the most common Dash game plan into Oldheim is she's going to sit around and do nothing and build up this board of 5 items, like 2 induction chamber, 3 plasma purifier, and use them all to pump up her pistol and attack Oldheim a really strong weapon and just play really defensive and just shoot the pistol. Because if she tries to go the boost aggro plan into Oldheim, she's very, very vulnerable to fatigue. Warhorn, just killing one of those items stops so much of her damage potential. So I think it would be pretty good in that matchup as well.
That's fair. I'm skeptical that it would do enough, but maybe it would.
Yeah, I think
because you would never sacrifice the go again item, right? You would always you would just shave off one. It would save you 2 points of damage per turn cycle then, because usually they attack you twice, right?
It'd be 3 points of damage if she has the 2 induction chambers out. So that's quite a bit of damage for 1 resource turning into 3 damage every turn. Shaving that off of Dash's damage output is very valuable.
Okay, I can see that.
The other thing worth mentioning about Warhorn is this deck list does include Mage Master boots. So in the Dash matchup specifically, you could use Mage Master boots to play the Warhorn and still do something because you'll get your action point back. You can either use that action point to spend your Tunic resource to activate the Warhorn, or you could just do something else with your action point.
Yeah, because it costs a resource to activate Mage Master boots. So assume you're pitching to blue, you get 1 resource to activate, 2 to cast, and then you still need an additional resource to activate. So like you said, usually a Tunic would be what you would want to most efficiently do, because you wouldn't want to pitch a whole nother card, have those 2 floating resources, and not really have a way to spend them.
So if it's good against Icelander and it's good against Dash, which are, I mean, they're both like pretty relevant heroes in the metagame, I'd say. I think it is probably worth a slot, assuming those 2 statements are true, that it's good against Icelander and good against Dash, which I haven't tested with it yet, but he won leads and he won the Battle Hardened there. So there's probably something going on. It's worth testing at least.
Yeah, they're really leading the world in innovation over there, right?
The other thing that we see is this is not as aggressive of an Oldheim deck as we're used to seeing from most Oldheim decks now. This deck has 3 Sigil of Solace, 3 Sink Below, and 3 Red Staunch Response. So it has 9 of its reds are just devoted to being defensive cards. And also at blue, it's not playing, I guess before we go to blue, it's also playing Oakenold with the like a high blue earth count. And then at blue, it's not playing nearly as many of the typical big blue guardian attacks that we're used to seeing. There's no blue glacial footsteps. There's no blue.
There's blue glacial footsteps. There's 3 glacial footsteps.
Oh, I'm blind. Okay. It's missing the other ones then. What are the other ones?
Cranial
Crush and Macho Grande and Thunderquake. It's missing all of those in blue. So it cut them to make room for both the extra Earth cards for Oakenold and then also this kind of Imposing Visage package where it's got 3 copies of Imposing Visage and it's got 1 Stamp Authority, 1 Hypothermia, and it can use on turn 0 if it goes first. It can pitch 2 cards to play Imposing Visage and get the Stamp Authority to
do what?
Which is a card that people probably don't know what it does. But Stamp Authority says when it enters the arena, if you have 2 or more cards and you pitch them with cost 3 or greater, your hero gains +1 intellect until end of turn. So if you use Stamp or Imposing Visage to go get that on turn 0, then you can pitch 2 blues that cost 3 or more, get Stamp Authority, and then your intellect goes up by 1 for that turn. So you get 5 cards plus your arsenal.
And then it also has the additional text where on-hit abilities don't trigger against you while it's on the battlefield, right?
Yeah. Though I don't think that is super relevant. I guess that spots that it would matter.
Yeah, that's what I was primarily focusing on, that line of text where I guess like what matchups would you most care about preventing the on-hit effects? Probably Oldheim. Like it probably is good in the mirror then, because you're just stopping all of their crush or disruptive elements from coming back on you. No command and conquer stuff's happening. No pummels happening to you or anything like that. But I don't think there are any other like super relevant on-hit triggers that happen in any other matchups that you would care about.
I would say if you're playing it on turn 0, it does have pretty nice upside against Briar. Since her embodiments of Earth are very impactful against you, you want to be swinging Winter's Well at her most turns. And or even bigger attacks. And if she doesn't, the difference between her having an embodiment and not having an embodiment is usually 1 or 2 points of life per turn.
And I guess she's also a hero that's normally playing like Coax, Commotion, and Snatch and stuff like that too. So stopping those cards is like some amount of equity as well. So
yeah,
making your Briar matchup even better.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also the classic 3 pummels, but also 3 Sigil of Solace. So once you have an extra card in your hand, most people are like, oh, there's a pummel. I'm going to play around this pummel and make sure that I'm blocking really effectively. And you go, okay. And then you play your Sigil of Solace, and then they feel real dumb. And I know you're quite a fan of that. Those cards being played together.
That's one of my favorite interactions. Like the cards don't like usually they're not like perfect for the same game plan, but there is a lot of value in including both in your list because if you have 2 cards, they have to like think about the possibility of pummel, and sometimes you just play a Sigil. It's powerful.
Very true. So is it just an Oldheim world and we're just living in it now? Because I really can't think of a deck that really beats up on Oldheim that also doesn't just lose to the clock. Because I guess like Dromai, if they specifically tech to beat Oldheim, right, with like the end game of like Ghostly Touch or whatever, that's usually Oldheim's worst matchup. But that matchup also takes like 2 hours to finish a game. So
yeah, I think the Dromai versus Oldheim matchup, my summary of it is if the Dromai wants to win the matchup, they can devote the slots to it, and they need to practice it a lot because it's actually really technical from the Dromai side to beat the Guardians, especially Guardians with a lot of poppers. But if a Dromai does that, it's really hard to beat it with Oldheim, especially when you only have 3 go-again attacks with the 3 Enlightened Strikes. So it's really hard to clear multiple dragons.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but aside from that, there's really not a deck that like could beat this because the Imperial Warhorn stops Icelander's most common way of defeating Oldheim, which is just like the end game Ice Eternal Frost X combo, right?
yeah, if the Imperial Warhorn tech is good enough to swing the Icelander matchup pretty heavily in your favor, and it makes the dash matchup from like a slightly negative matchup to like even or slightly positive, then this just looks like it could potentially be the best deck. And I guess there is one deck that does smash this deck, and we're not talking about it today, but the Iris of Reality Dromai decks, I don't know how you're supposed to beat that with Guardian.
Yeah, but I don't know how the deck beats anything else, but I guess it's
yeah, but it destroys Guardians.
Fair enough. Anything else you want to say before we move on then?
I don't think so.
Okay. Where are we going to next then, Michael? Where in the world are we going?
So next we have Connor Rooney's Bravo deck, also or from Battle Hardened, New Jersey. He got 5th with Bravo Showstopper. For equipment, there's Anathos, Crater Fist, Crown of Providence, Final Spring Tunic, Iron Wrought Legs, Norrøn Boots, Norrøn Gloves, Norrøn Hood, and Tectonic Plating. Sounds like a very typical Bravo equipment suite to me. The one thing that stands out is the Final Spring Tunic, and that's there for Icelander. At red, there's 3 Command and Conquer, 3 Crippling Crush, 3 Erase Face, 3 Fate Foreseen, 3 Pulverize, 3 Pummel, 3 Sigil of Solace, 3 Sink Below, 3 Spinal Crush, and 3 Zealous Belting. At blue, there's 1 Buckle, 3 Buckling Blow, 3 Choke Slam, 3 Cranial Crush, 3 Debilitate, 3 Disable, 3 Imposing Visage, 2 Lunging Press, 3 Macho Grande, 3 Rouse the Ancients, 3 Showtime, 1 Stamp Authority, 3 Terrace Under, 3 Thunderquake, and 3 Unmovable.
So once again, seeing the Imposing Visage turn 0 setup with Stamp Authority. So I guess that's just like the new hot tech that all the Guardians are playing right now.
Yeah, I think I would say it's better in Bravo because of Bravo's limited access to like good blues.
I was about to say good cards, but
yeah, good cards. That is not wrong. You also see Imposing Visage is also pretty good that it can get Showtime. So like I think the best thing Bravo can do on turn 0 is Imposing Visage, get a Showtime, and then heave a Pulverize. And then you have this heave Pulverize, and the next turn you draw an extra card off your Showtime. And that's just a very, very strong opener.
Talk to me about 3 Pulverize, though. I've been seeing this pop up more and more, and I'm just like, how are you ever casting 3 Pulverize in a game?
Yeah, three seems like a lot. I don't really know why you have three, but Bravo's cards aren't very good. He has Crippling Crush, which is a good card, and then after that, like it just goes downhill very quickly. So
Fair enough.
I think like Pulverize is a card that you like never see three of in Oldheim. I think in Bravo it's not nearly as bad just because your card quality is so meh.
Yeah, I don't know how you can talk about bad card quality when we have Lunging Press All Star in here, a card that either gets 2 value on defense or 1 value on offense. That's just that's just good, clean, quality value right there, Michael. Could you imagine in a world where you're like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to block 14 through this Pulverize and come back with my 0 for 4 and get them, and then you just Lunging Press over the Pulverize to the 15th point of damage and get them real good.
Yeah, Lunging Press, it can be worth 1 damage, and this on hit that is sometimes worth a card. If that on hit's worth a card, then your Lunging Press was worth it. But the amount of times you're just going to have the stupid Lunging Press that blocks for 2 and isn't 3 cost for your Anathos, it just seems like it's very high cost to include it in your deck.
Or I guess like the most reasonable upside is your opponent just comfortably blocks like your spinal crush for 6, and you just push it to 10 value, and then you spinal crush them, and then you just whoop 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 into the sunset.
Yeah, it being the difference between Crippling Crush hitting it or crushing and not crushing is also pretty big.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could see spots where it would blow people out.
But then I guess that being said too, most people are going to be playing defense reactions into Bravo anyways. So unless your Spinal Crush is then dominated and they can't commit any more cards to block if they have a defense reaction, they can blow out your blowout pretty regularly, I would imagine. But I don't know.
Yeah, I would assume it was like at least solid for Connor over the weekend. He top 8'd the event with it. So
yeah, fair enough. So where do we think
but,
Boomer Bravo is going to sit in the metagame, though? Does he just kind of like this awkward middle ground hero that is popping up? Because he could also include this Imperial Warhorn tattoo to show up a Dromai matchup, although he doesn't usually go as long into Icelander, given that he's just generally more aggressive, right?
yeah, I do think Bravo is a solid choice into Icelander, especially when you have the Tunic tech. I don't really know why you would choose to play Bravo instead of Oldheim. I think Oldheim doesn't have any matchups that like you'd rather be Bravo in, and I think the card quality you get when you play all these good ice cards and the quality of Winter's Whale and Stalagmite is just worth playing Oldheim over Bravo, basically.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, yeah, I don't think. I guess Bravo is a pretty good budget option. You can play Skullcap over Crown of Providence, and if you don't play the Tunic, then the deck is very cheap. So, that is an argument to play Bravo, but
That's fair.
yeah, I think if cost isn't an issue and you want to play a Guardian, you should go with Oldheim. And you can build Oldheim in a lot of different ways. You can make him more aggressive and stuff, and he's probably just does it better than Bravo.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I guess speaking of budget, then, do we want to talk about our next Dromai deck?
Yeah, so Arthur Murda won a ProQuest with a budget Dromai deck. For equipment, there's Deep Blue, Ironhide Helm, Mage Master Boots, Northern Hood, Northern Robe, and Silken Form, and Sash of Sandakai. So all commons in the equipment slots. No legendaries, no expensive cards.
Mm-hmm.
At red, there's 2 Burn Them All, 3 Dunebreaker Sent Up High, 2 Erina's Prayer, 1 Erase Face, 2 Fate Foreseen, 3 Invoke Asvalai, 3 Invoke Chromai, 1 Invoke Dominia, 3 Invoke Caloria, 3 Invoke Miragi, 2 Invoke Necria, 1 Invoke Uvia, 2 Invoke Thamai, 1 Invoke Tumultai, 3 Invoke Vinserakai, 3 Invoke Yenderai, 3 Oasis Respite, 3 Rake the Embers, 2 Ravenous Rabble, 3 Sigil of Solace, 3 Sink Blow, 3 Snatch, 2 Spears of Surreality, 3 Sweeping Blow. At yellow, there's 1 Remembrance, 2 That All You Got, and 1 Toma Fyendal. And at blue, there's 3 Evermoss Enepai, 2 Energy Potion, 3 Passing Mirage, 3 Sweeping Blow, and 1 Time Snap Potion.
Okay. So this is, I don't think we were going to talk about this list at first, just because we were like, oh, well, we're like a highest level competitive, focused podcast. We want people to, really understand what's going on at like the highest levels of competition. And well, this deck clearly could be, optimized by throwing some money at it with some of the legendary pieces of equipment that it's missing. There's no cards like Command and Conquer in it. So I that's what's making us say that it's a budget option. But that being said, it's still one. And I also don't think it's that much worse than regular versions of Dromai. I guess like the more standard default versions. And I guess that's kind of what we wanted to talk about. So I don't know if you want to go into any of those considerations as well, though, Michael.
I guess I just really like that this shows that you can win a ProQuest without like breaking the bank. Some of the cards that you would include in a more typical Dromai list, I guess the biggest one is Crown of Providence. That is like, I think it's over $200 right now, and I think the whole deck is probably less than $200 without Crown of Providence, and that's, I don't know, it's really cool, I guess.
Yeah, and there have been discussions about, is Fab a too high like skill ceiling format right now, and does it need more variance in order to compete? And I guess like one of the benefits of a game being lower variance, or where better players are going to win more often, is that if you're getting more equity out of being better than your opponent instead of having more equity out of just having better cards than your opponent, I think I would still much rather lean towards a game that has better equity out of people being better than people who can just throw money and win the game. So I think that wasn't really discussed a lot in some of the discussions online. I don't know. I guess I didn't pay super close attention to how that conversation developed, but I guess that's just kind of like my 2 cents on that take. But I don't know if you have any other sentiments on that topic.
Yeah, I really like that. I really like that the game being lower variance means that if you have the skills and you play better than the other people at the event, then you could win with a deck that maybe isn't optimized perfectly because you play better than the other people, and that's something that like would go away more, I guess, if the game had more variance in it. I think, I don't know.
Yeah, because I imagine the variance would be tied to like more individual, like higher power level cards, and that would obviously be more expensive, higher power level cards than, given that that's just how card games work. When something's good and powerful and rare, the price goes up. And if that's also leading to people winning like games that are creating more variance, then I would imagine that would just start to become some of the most like expensive cards in the game.
Mm-hmm. And since we're touching on this conversation, I think like one thing that draws people to card games a lot is like all the dynamic board states and how the games change a lot. And I think Flesh and Blood does a really good job at like having these dynamic board states and like the games not feeling very samey. Like every game feels reasonably different in my opinion. And it does that without imposing a ton of variance in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And like just from like ultimately the flavor of Flesh and Blood is just like these 2 warriors starting out at like their peak potential. They have all of their cards, all of their resources, all of their equipment, and then like as life totals get lower, you're just starting to like scrap it out and brawl, and it starts to really feel like that flavor of like, oh man, like I'm feeling like I'm worn out from this battle. Like I have lower life total, I have less equipment, I've used all of my best tricks in my deck, and now I'm still here and we're both at 1 life and we're just kind of like scrapping it out, flaccidly swinging a hammer back and forth with your last blue. And it's just like, I don't know, it's cool. Or you're Azalea and you're just dying. So I don't know, it's just good flavor.
Or you're Azalea and you're just dying. You ran out of arrows. Like,
yeah,
that's what happens. Sometimes
you can't hit people with your bow. You can't go like, eh.
Yeah, you didn't bring a backup weapon. You just have your bow. You ran out of arrows. You're in trouble now.
Yeah, you're just gonna get smashed in the face by a hammer. Sorry.
Because they can keep swinging their hammer. I guess touching on the list, it is a very dragon heavy version of Dromai. I think there's like 30 different 30 invokes or something.
Mhm.
So very dragon heavy, pretty blue light with 12 total, with some of them being cards that I assume aren't played in every matchup. And then we see the Mage Master's Tome combo that also works well with Chromai, because Chromai can give you an action point to play the Tome also. So,
Fair enough.
yeah. I don't know. I changed the subject a little bit, but
It's okay.
I wanted to get back on the deck. Anything else you wanted to add about this Dromai list?
I guess it's just, how do we see Dromai shaking out, like budget or not, in the meta going forward? I guess in the world of Oldheims and Icelanders, does it just seem like it's time to bust out the dragons?
Yeah, we kind of talked about this in the Oldheim discussion, but I think Dromai can beat Oldheim if she really wants to, especially if you go the weird Iris of Reality build, which might be. I don't know how that deck does against the different aggro decks. I have not tested a lot of Iris of Reality, but I have lost to a lot of prisms as playing Guardians, and I know auras are really bad. So
Yeah.
really bad for you.
But what about Icelander?
Sorry. Icelander is, in my opinion, a slightly draw my favorite matchup. It becomes harder if the Icelanders are playing more poppers. So when you include 2 Command and Conquerors on top of maybe your Fyendals and your Wounded Bulls, that makes your draw my matchup a lot better. But I would say if Icelander and Oldheim are two of the more popular decks and you're not expecting a lot of Phi or a lot of Viserai, then Dromai is a pretty solid choice. Or a lot of Rhinar. Rhinar is also a really bad matchup for Dromai.
Yeah, but I don't think Rhinar or Viserai are anywhere near like relevant deck choices at this point in the meta. Maybe something will change and somebody will prove us wrong with that, but definitely based on our testing and week 1 results, it doesn't seem like we're in very Viserai or Rhinar heavy meta.
Yeah. I would say if the metagame is Icelander, Oldheim, Dromai, then I think Rhinar is at least reasonable into that field. I think like he's a little short on power, but those are all matchups that his deck should line up well against.
You would think. You would really think that, wouldn't you?
I say having like played 0 Rhinar games outside of limited.
Yeah, I actually busted out some Rhinar testing after we had a conversation at a team meeting. I was like, maybe Rhinar is sick. And then I played a couple matches of Rhinar, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm just Rhinar still.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but hey, Rhinar has some put up some results as well. So
yeah, and I might not be the best Rhinar player in the world, so maybe somebody else out there is gonna prove me wrong.
Yeah, I wouldn't count him out.
Okay.
Ready to move on to our last deck?
I don't want to talk about Briar anymore. I'm over it. I just want to edit however much we have and just call it an episode. So I'll just.
All right. So no last deck. We won't talk about Briar today.
So any concluding thoughts before we wrap up the cast in general, Michael? Do you think this is a healthy meta? Do you think this is too ice heavy? Or do you think there's just some results that have yet to be just break out, I guess?
So I love the Ice Heroes. I love Oldheim and Icelander. And I think currently I don't think I would take action based on like week 1. I think there are counters to the Ice Heroes. I think Dromai looks good. I think that I think Dash looks solid in this field as well. And I think potentially Rhinar might be good. I think there's like ways to fight these Ice Heroes, and they're kind of like spread out trying to like, they have good matchups in the aggro decks because their Ice Disruption lines up really well against the aggro decks. But when decks that aren't vulnerable to this Ice Disruption or aren't as vulnerable to the Ice Disruption are more popular, like Dromai, like Dash, like Rhinar even, then we'll see if they can stay on top, I guess. And I personally, I really like both the Ice Heroes. So like if they're the best 2 decks, but it's not like oppressive or they're not winning like, or they're not like a huge percentage of the field or anything, I think it's fine if these 2 ice control decks are like the best decks as long as the other decks have tools to fight against them.
Yeah, and I guess I didn't even consider like bans until you just said something, but like I think the only card that like you would ban that is shared between the 2 would be Channel Lake Frigid. And I'm pretty sure once you ban Channel Lake Frigid, the format actually just degenerates into like Phi's the best deck dot format, or like dash. Just like once that card is gone, like there's nothing stopping decks from just going like pedal to the metal 100% of the time, like red line versions of the deck almost. So
I could see them touching hypothermia, because hypothermia out of Icelander and the matchups that it's good in is really kind of stupid. You just like lose 2 cards of value sometimes, and that can be like, that's just a lot for one card to do. But that said, I don't think Icelander is the best deck in the format right now. I think I would say Oldheim's probably better, and because of that, I would be hesitant to ban a card from Icelander. But it does allow you, like banning hypothermia or suspending hypothermia until Icelander Living Legends does allow decks like Dash to actually have a very good Icelander matchup. It lets Dromai have a reasonably better Icelander matchup, and it lets Briar maybe have a fighting chance against Icelander, which could be what the format needs to be a little healthier.
yeah. And at this point, like, this would be like, if we're going to ban cards out of Oldheim again, this would basically be like the 3rd time we're banning cards out of a Guardian deck, you know, in the past like year. I guess Starvo is a bit of a unique circumstance, but like still banning that Armstats did have an impact on Oldheim, for as much as he really wasn't a factor in that meta.
Well, even not counting Starvo, this would be Oldheim's 3rd ban. We've banned Awakening and we've banned Pulse of Eisenloft.
Oh yeah, you're right.
So,
you're right. Yeah.
So if Oldheim gets hit again, that is his 3rd ban.
I forgot about Awakening. I just blanked on that card for some reason. I also contributed Awakening more towards Starvo as well, I guess. But like, I guess like it was first picked up on like people thinking it was problematic in Oldheim. So,
well, I think Awakening just was fine until Pulverize got printed. Then it was problematic because free Pulverizes is very, very powerful.
Yeah, it turns out cost reduction is not a thing that you want people to do very easily. We see that with Scaletta. We've seen that with Awakening. And I think eventually we'll see that with Courage of Bladehold, but we'll get there. We'll just need a better one.
Yeah. I guess Courage of Bladehold is very strong, but I think like the fact that Awakening and Scaletta have much higher like limits of how many resources they can generate. Like
for now,
Scaletta was basically unlimited, and Awakening can generate like 10 resources, which is like a plus 5 or something. It's just a lot of resources. Whereas Courage of Bladehold, I guess it does generate 6 on your Lumina Bolton turns. So
yeah, and I think like Scaletta put a cap on the design space on Runeblade cards for the rest of the time because you can't generate cards that you get too much value out of Scaletta. And Awakening put a cap on the design space on Guardian cards because you can't print huge overcosted Guardian cards and then have them.
You can't print Pulverize when you have Awakening.
Yeah, exactly. So like now they could even print like even dumber, like harder to cast cards than like Pulverize if they wanted, but you can't do that if Awakening exists. And I think Courage of Bladehold functions a very similar function where you can't print really expensive like swords or like warrior weapons while it's existing. And if we ever see like a weapon that's too pushed in warrior, which I don't think will ever happen because LSS hates warrior, source I'm a Bolton player. But if that ever did happen and they decided to forgive us and give us a good like sword, I think we would see Courage of Bladehold potentially become a problem. So
yeah, that makes sense. Courage is very powerful, and cost reduction is very powerful.
Agreed. So I guess thanks for listening, everybody. We really appreciate all the support. And the next time you are playing Flesh and Blood, always remember, mind your manners. Thanks for listening.